Uh, uh. Good morning. Good morning.
What's up, everybody?
Good morning.
Dave, Morning Deuce, Thursday, getting it going. This might not be the most popular episode in the world. I feel like it's going to be a little bit of a rant because I don't have all my thoughts completely formulated in my head. So maybe I will by the end of this. The alligator baby situation in Florida is kind of being weird to me a little bit. Why is everything man versus wild lately? Like, we freaked out about the Harambe situation with the gorilla, and I get it. Like, it's crazy, and the video was nuts. And I think the video carried that story. But now this 2-year-old in the alligator, and I don't think in Florida, as a parent, you can't be letting your 2-year-old run around near a fresh, brackish body of water. I mean, my dad lives in Florida. When we take the dog to the beach, we have to walk by like ponds to get to the beach. And you put the dog on a leash, you walk, and the dog is right next to you because you can't chance it until you get to the ocean. It's like a thing. I don't understand why there isn't something going through somebody's head. And if there's not, then what do you expect the animal to do? Especially this animal is a wild animal that's built to attack things. Also, I don't really know if there's a lot of eyewitness accounts to this. I'm having trouble figuring out how they found the body of this 2-year-old. Alligators aren't like other animals. Once they attack you and they grab you, they eat you. It's not like, sharks. Okay, so a shark uses sonar, essentially, like through the water, to attack things. So a lot of times a shark will see shadows. It will see a human being swimming, and it gives off the same vibrations and stuff that a wounded fish does or a wounded animal. It has kind of a similar structure from a shadowy standpoint to like what a seal looks like, especially on a surfboard. Sharks will take a bite out of a person, but a lot of times they'll bite and then they don't want to kill the person. They swim away. That wasn't their intention. They don't want to eat human beings. That's not the same with alligators. If an alligator decides to attack you, it can be a person, another animal. I mean, they eat you. They swallow you. They eat you. I mean, I went on a bayou tour when I was in Louisiana, when I moved out to San Diego. One of those fan boat backwoods things. They were throwing marshmallows into the pond area because they look like fish eggs, and alligators love to eat fish eggs, I guess. And the alligators are just chomping up these marshmallows. And the marshmallows basically have no flavor to them, but they just think it's a fish egg, so they just keep eating it. Well, it turns out that this pontoon boat, they had these wild boars that used to come up to the boat that they would feed. The alligators started to realize where the boars would come. One huge alligator waited and waited and waited. One time, a baby boar comes up. The alligator supposedly one of the guides watched it. He grabs the baby boar whole and takes the baby boar underneath the water, suffocates said baby boar, and eats it completely. When an alligator has a meal that's that large, according to the guide, they have 4 components to their heart. They can shut off 3 components of their heart and basically hibernate like a bear does in the winter, hibernate for like months and months and months, even a year on a meal that big. They slow their heart rate down super low. They just sleep and stay underwater and let that food digest through their entire body until eventually they wake up again when they need more nourishment. This is like one of the most prehistoric feeding animals of all time. So I don't understand how the 2-year-old body just kind of ends up there, like how you just find the 2-year-old. That doesn't make sense to me. An alligator doesn't chomp a 2-year-old and then just be like, my bee, and swim off. That's not how it works. They chomp it, they thrash it, they try to drown it, and when that happens, other alligators come over. This whole thing is weird to me, man. I don't think there's no video. I don't think there's a lot of eyes going on. But then now they're going on this rampage, like killing alligators, trying to find out which alligator did it. But how does that even matter at this point? Like, more alligators are just going to come to the ponds. That's what fresh water attracts in Florida. It attracts alligators. I don't understand how killing these alligators is going to do anything. Maybe putting up some signs, some fences in your community, having people monitor the areas to try to make sure there are no alligators, or if there are, they can try to work them out of the area. Fences, signs, those type of things, so a parent knows not to let a 2-year-old run near the fresh water, even though they should anyway. I don't get the obsession with this story. There's like still tragic incidents that are happening all the time, and I get you. Maybe it's a fascination thing, but to me, I'm sorry if this seems heartless towards a 2-year-old, but it just doesn't seem that important in the big scheme of things at all. Like, there's so many other important things going on right now. I mean, North Korea has literally said they don't care about sanctions. They're just going to use plutonium to build nuclear weapons, like, in front of everybody's faces. We seem to not be that concerned about that. China is building fake man-made islands in the ocean, taking over other countries' pieces of land to set up military outposts as much as possible. All of the nuclear nations, including the United States, are test exploding nuclear warheads. Like, these things are happening pretty constantly. Obviously, we have some gun issues going on, or at least some terror issues, or both. We definitely have some issues with people prejudging people and racism and bigotry. I mean, that's 100% obvious. We have some mental health issues in this country that are really, really, really bad. And it just seems like we overshadow a lot of that stuff for stories like this alligator story. I just don't get it. Like, to me, it's a sad thing. I'm sorry that family lost a child. I'm sorry that happened. But what do you want? The alligator's not going to do anything. Now the parent, that's a loss for them. They're probably going to have to go to therapy and live with that for the rest of their life, and it's over. I don't understand this, like, crazy obsession with a story like that, or with a story like the gorilla story. I guess it's just sort of, it seems to me a distraction because of something that's a conversation starter, but it's not really what we should be talking about. That's just how I feel. It just sort of feels like sometimes these things are just overblown beyond. And I'm all for entertainment. I'm all for pop culture. I love the laughs and stuff. This isn't like a funny story. This isn't a pop culture story. Maybe this is just everyone's kind of secretly afraid of alligators. We've all been to Disney World, and it's like shockingly relatable and sad. But in the end, it's not going to have an impact. What's the impact of this story in 2 months? The impact of this story in 2 months is nothing. No impact whatsoever. What's the impact of the Harambe story in 2 months? Nothing. There's no impact. What, a zoo builds a slightly bigger fence? Like, that should have existed already, and the sad part is that if that happens, in one zoo, okay, there's your very minor impact. The impact for some of those other stories I just mentioned is, like, astronomical. How we try to deal with, mental sickness, and how we have to deal with, like, racism and bigotry and the international relations with what's going on, in North Korea and China. Those are decisions that have astronomical impacts. Like, we passed a bill that got through the Senate. No word if it's going to get through the House or the White House, but the bill was to make women basically draft eligible, that they would have to sign up for the draft, just like I did, to sign up for the draft if they want to go get student loans for college from the federal government, amongst many other things. That's a huge thing. Like women, that's a big thing whether you support it or not. Women are getting involved in the military, especially, right now all the positions are voluntary, but now all positions are open to them in several branches in the military, and good for that, especially like so many women can do that and they pass all the tests and they're doing great. But the idea that that's now kind of like a mandatory thing for them and could be really soon could have a massive impact. We've been at a constant state of war as a country for like 50 or 60 years, I think now. We're not making more friends overseas. We don't seem to be limiting our military growth or our military use overseas. That could have a major, major, major impact. I'm not saying necessarily a draft is coming again soon, but that impacts a lot of people. And that story is not getting a lot of play. It's not moving around very far. Yet, something about an alligator is being talked about absolutely everywhere with no impact. It seems like we're distracting ourselves. I guess it goes back to the interview from a bunch of weeks ago. My friend Derek, who does all the positive psychology, and it's like your mind is a really powerful thing. So what do you kind of want to put inside it? How do you want to program your mind? It's like, well, do you want to program your mind by distracting yourself with some like fear-oriented stuff about an alligator? Or do you want to, think about stuff that's also maybe not pleasant, but definitely much more impactful and something that you should have a cognitive thought about? So anyway, that's just how I feel. I guess I'm just a little worn out from some stories like this. I think we are all kind of missing the point on some of these bigger issues. We fall behind a big issue after a tragic event, and that's fine, but there's a lot of things going on that just don't seem to get the attention. And I think it's maybe fatigue. Like, we have North Korea fatigue. Like, we've been afraid of North Korea for so long. It's, what can we do about it? And I think that was Gladwell, who you guys know, is someone I said that if I had to pick a random person to run for president, he might be one. Malcolm Gladwell, the great author who's written a bunch of great books, and in one of them, he talked about how in England, there was constant bombing during World War II from the Nazis, and at first, they were afraid it was going to drastically destroy everyone's way of life, and at first, it was really difficult for people in England to get adjusted to it. But they became so used to it that it didn't feel like an imminent threat anymore. People were responding slower to the air raid sirens. People were reacting slower, and it wasn't impacting their days as much because they had grown used to the fact that they were sort of in that current state of chaos. Like, I think we've sadly grown complacent with some of the things that's going on with China and North Korea and some other things. And then all of a sudden it takes a really shocking event. And I'm kind of sick of the shocking events being the things that make a change, and then just like the weird pop culture crime stories being the ones we talk about. It just doesn't make sense. We got to get beyond the fatigue. We have to just be smarter than that. Anyway, that's the end of part one. I know it was a rant. That's just how I feel. You don't necessarily have to agree with me. Hell, maybe I'll feel differently tomorrow in a couple days. Maybe if some bad things happen, I'll just be wishing we had a story to distract ourselves. But that's how I feel now. I feel like it's an alligator and it's a 2-year-old, and I'm not saying that to be heartless. I'm sure that's devastating for the family. But it doesn't have an impact for the reaction that it's getting. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. For part 2 today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite movies because it came out in America June 19th, 1967. So it will be 49 years old this Sunday. The movie's called The King of Hearts. I saw the movie as part of a class in high school. I thought it was unbelievable. I've seen it several times. It really is amazing. It was released in France, I want to say, or something, in 1966, but it played, and I had seen it maybe 4 or 5 times, and eventually, like, probably 5-6 years later, I brought it up to my mom, and she told me that she was also in love with that movie, and that she had seen it. She'd snuck into movie theaters in her early 20s to go see it when it first came out, and she probably has seen it dozens of times. And we watched it together maybe once or twice. It's amazing. It is applicable today, not only because of the 49 years, and I'm telling you it's good, but I mean, on Rotten Tomatoes, it got a 91%, and it got an audience score of 90. Like, it's really, really good. Basically, it's World War I, and I believe the English are trying to take this town back from the Germans. And they send in this one guy as like a spy. The Germans leave the town. There's a bomb in the town, and he has to get rid of the bomb. What happens is when the Germans leave the town and he has to infiltrate it, they leave the door open to the insane asylum, and all the people from the insane asylum come out and take over this town in France, this like castle town. I think it's France, maybe England. Take over this castle town. And he doesn't know that they're all insane. And he is living among them, like trying to fit in and blend in to try to figure out how to get rid of this bomb. And he's talking to all these people who are mentally ill, and he doesn't know it. And it sort of becomes this crazy shenanigan of like, if everyone's a little bit mentally ill, is anyone mentally ill? And it's a paradigm shift movie. It's about, shifting a paradigm. If it's about maybe changing your level of thinking about other people and just not dismissing them as being crazy when they think differently than you. But there's a part of the movie that just popped into my head where one of the guys who's a little bit crazy, he opens a cage that has a lion in it because there was a circus in town. And the sane sort of spy says, like, you can't do that. You can't let that animal out. Like, it'll attack people. He's like, no, if you put the animal in the cage, it's going to do everything it can to get out of the cage because you forced it in there. But if you kind of teach it the cage is okay, but leave the door open, the animal might not want to come out. It'll just be comfortable being where it thinks everything's okay. And I totally paraphrased it. It's much more eloquent and condensed in a subtitled French way. And there's 2 or 3 languages in the film. So some are subtitled, and there's a lot of English. But that kind of made me think of a little bit about, the animal things that I was thinking about, but just people in general. If you force people into thinking that something is right or wrong, all they're going to want to do is break out of that if you force them to feel like they're trapped somewhere. But if you kind of let them open and teach where they are, it's okay, but they can leave. But where they are, they tend to be a little bit more regular. The movie's amazing. It does make you think about what makes sense. I used to teach a Special Olympic swim team when I was a swim coach. It was really, really amazing experience because I'd be stressed about a bunch of things, and I'd be thinking about all these things that I thought were important. And then I would teach the Special Olympians, and all of that kind of goes away because you realize most of it's not very important. And a lot of those athletes had horrible things that they were trying to overcome, and it was so much easier for them to be happier than it was for me to be happy. I mean, they could reach like a naive, blissful level of joy with the simplest things. And you realize, like, whoa, there must be something going right. I mean, I can't get that happy no matter what. I'm maybe that happy like once or twice a year, and you're doing it twice a practice. So anyway, just to get outside yourself a little bit, I recommend the movie. I'm going to leave us with the 1-minute trailer. I hope you all have an awesome Thursday. Tomorrow I have a great interview with one of my friends, Lance, golf expert. He's going to tell us all about the U.S. Open. Get excited. Deuces.
A tribute to the genius of Philippe de Broca. An odd assortment. A strange deportment. A crowning achievement. The King of Hearts. The King of Hearts. A motion picture about... It's about... King of Hearts is about everything.